Listeners, episode 81 of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast is incredible. I sat down and spoke with Sara Jahnke, who is a researcher who focuses on firefighters. She is the director and a senior scientist with the Center for Fire Rescue and EMS Health Research within NDRI-USA, Inc. She has over a decade of research experience in firefighters and has published a ton of studies on things such as health of women firefighters, behavioral health, risk of injury, cancer, cardiovascular risk factors, and substance abuse and use with funding from FEMA and NIH. Sara is just an incredible guest. I know you're going to love the interview. And also, we got a little off topic a couple times. And one of the things we talked about was hugs and the value of a good hug. So sorry, Megan Lautz, the Rescue RD. You got called out, my friend. Enjoy the episode. And as always, please rate it, share it, and I would love it if you would leave me a review. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Hey listeners, it is AZ with the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast, and I am back for yet another episode. And today I have Sara Jahnke. Can you please say hello? Jeremiah, help me out. Sara, can you please say hello? Actually, leave it in, Jeremiah. It's hilarious. Please say hello to my listeners.
Hello to the listeners. It's great. It's great to be here.
We're off to a great start. All right, Sara, this is just how we show up. Well, okay. I'm going to ask you three really, really, really tough questions. The first one being, who is Sara?
I direct the Center for Fire Rescue and EMS Health Research. I've been doing research for about a little over 15 years on firefighter health. Started an organization called Science to the Station. Mom to 3 kids, a 16-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old, which is a lot all at one time. Wife to Nick, always overcommitted. That's pretty much my thing. 1 of 8 kids. So if that was what you're looking for.
Sara, what sets your soul on fire?
You know what? A couple of things. One, fire service research. I know it sounds so nerdy, but I love what I do. I love doing research that focuses on improving health and wellness. I love the folks in this space. I love everything about my job. I have a dream job. I love my job. So my job, and also my family. And I specifically have gotten really involved in a lot of work and effort on inclusion because my 7-year-old has Down syndrome. So my kids, my family, and my job. Yeah.
That's a great answer. And I think I did some snooping in the background. We're already going down a rabbit hole. Am I correct? Was your dad a first responder?
He was. Yeah. He retired as fire chief after he was a dozen years at Overland Park, right outside of Kansas City. Was real involved nationally. So I grew up around ideas like going to the National Fire Academy. He did the Harvard Executive Leadership Program. Grew up with all the folks in Kansas City, Smokey Dyer and all those folks he was an only child. So our people were fire department people. So yeah. And now he's in the process of retiring from a company that my siblings are taking over, WHP Training Towers. So he stayed in it. The coolest thing, he came after I was in Kansas City this last year, and he came to the conference, and it was so great to have it here and to be able to bring all the Kansas City folks in, and then all the folks that I know, and they got to meet him. It was really cool.
That is a wonderful story. I love it. All right. Third really tough question. How are you changing the world?
Man, a day at a time. I tell you that whatever the next thing is, I actually think, because people are like, oh, you're doing great things. I'm like, we are doing great things. So I think what my role is in changing the world is partnering with people doing really great things and being willing to like exchange and share and collaborate. And I think I do some cool stuff. I have some cool research projects. I'm excited about those. But man, the people in the fire service right now that are working on improving the lives of firefighters. I mean, think about where we are in health and wellness compared to 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Like, we're making all this progress, and it's, I think we're making a difference. I think we're at a tipping point. And it's so not, I mean, I think you ask how am I changing the world? I'm changing the world by working with other people who want to change the world.
Oh, that is such a good answer. I want to talk to you about, unfortunately, I just learned about the Science to the Station project too late. It was too late for me to register and attend, but that was literally 2 days ago, right?
Yes.
I want to hear all about it. Tell me all the details.
It was amazing. And you can come next year, because as we were meeting, I was like, oh, man, the conference is starting. And, those are big lifts. Like I think we had about 2 in and out. There were a couple of people that just came for one day, but I think we were around 220, 225. We had a couple meetings associated with it. So the firefighter cancer cohort meeting met one morning, the FCSN, taking action against cancer and the fire service 10-year update meeting occurred there. We had safety, health, and survival section from IAFC had a board meeting there. So we had like a lot of other meetings going on too. And I'm like, people kept going, so next year. And I'm like, let's get through this year. But about I'm going to say 6 hours in, I was like, yeah, we can't, this is our moment. Not just me, but like everyone, this is our moment in the fire service for change and for improvement. And we got to strike while the iron's hot. So it was awesome. We had firefighters, we had fire chiefs, we had fire marshals, we had attorneys, we had scientists, OC health providers, psychologists, like all in the same space. And it was, I think, the best compliments I got. One person said it was the most welcoming conference they'd ever been to. Like, they felt so part of it, which was amazing. And another person, actually, there were some women that were there, and they were like, this is totally a different conference than we thought we were going to. And she kind of started to tear up. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. We weren't clear on. And she goes, no, I never knew that there were people like what you guys do trying to make my life healthier and help me live longer. And I was like, there's so much effort in that space. Like, people need to know that work is going on, so they feel loved and supported and all those things. So I think those are 2 of my biggest compliments from the week.
Sarah, that's a gut check. That's amazing.
Oh, it almost made me cry. I made her give me 2 hugs.
Oh, you're a hugger. I like that.
Oh, God, a total hugger. And I believe in long hugs.
Oh,
yes. Like, come in here, because I feel like sometimes you kind of like a pat. No, I want to I am connecting with you. I'm especially, oh man, someone says they've had a hard day, and I'm like, you get over here.
Just get over here. You know what? I have to diss on my friend, Megan Lautz. She is the rescue RD. She's a dietitian that works specifically with firefighters, and she's just an amazing human, an amazing dietitian, and she gives shitty hugs.
We're going to have to work with her on that.
Oh my God.
She's doing fantastic work. So I hate to see her thwarted by her lack of hugging skills.
I know. Well, you know what? Okay. If I can get you on board, maybe we just need to have sort of a classroom session with Megan. Right. I don't know. Right. And she knows. I tell her publicly, you were a shitty hugger.
My sister who is not as into hugs as I am, said, was making fun of him. And she's like, who's a long hugger? Nick Orlando, my husband. And she's like, and so I told him that. So now he makes even longer inappropriate long hugs. And he has a list of things he says to her, like, you smell different when you're awake. I mean, just all sorts of like wildly inappropriate things to make her feel awkward, and she's not a fan of the long hug. But I believe in full body hugs. That was the other
yes.
Wilson from New Mexico was like, you were a full body hugger. And I'm like, what? Everyone is. And she's like, no, 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 no. Most people lean in and kind of pat. And she's like, it's good. It's good for you. It's good. It is so good for you. Like
hugging. And in my opinion, hugging is, I hug like a linebacker. Hugging is a full contact sport.
It is. How else do people know? And there's nothing that says like, thank you and expresses that like just a good, love a good hug.
You are my people. Sarah, you are my people.
We can't wait till we meet in person.
I know. We have to make this happen. Well, before we get to, because I want to talk about some of the research that you are diving into, but before we get to that, I am crossing my fingers, like double crossing my fingers, because tonight I have an event that's been in the planning process for like 6 weeks. And the backstory is my friend Drew Gonzalez, he's a Ph.D. candidate at Texas A&M University. And he called me up one day and he's like, he does research in fire. And he called me up one day and he's like, Annette, you know who's reading my research? And I was like, other researchers, duh. And he said, how do we get this science to the firefighters? Should we write a book? Should we make a website, a blog post? I'm like, hold up. No. Easy, big guy. Let's just start. Let's ask them first if they want it. And then if they want it, we'll just start with a webinar. So I have the 7-minute science webinar tonight. We have 225 people registered. There are a lot of researchers registered, but there are a lot of firefighters, and each researcher gets 7 and only 7 minutes to talk about the research and then give the firefighters the take-home message. Okay, I've got my fingers crossed. Sarah, what do you think this is going to be successful? What do you think?
It's going to be hugely successful. And I am registered with 224 other people because I think it's awesome. And it was before you'd even reached out to me. I was like, I'm going to register. That is awesome. I tell you what we've started doing. We've started doing what we call Fred Talks instead of TED Talks. So firefighter research, education, and design. And let me tell you, you can't get your point across in it well. And I'm generous. I gave 15 minutes, but like, they're the hardest presentations to give because you have to take everything that you can think of and narrow it down. But I think it's the most impactful. I think it's perfect. And, people will dig in. We actually worked on a project one time. IEFC started this F-STAR program, and it was taking research and making it into one-pagers. Really cool. We're revitalizing the work. It's, what was done? What does it mean? What is the tabletop discussion about it around the kitchen table? What does the fire chief need to know about it? And we found that there are a lot of people who just want that one pager. There's some that want the full peer-reviewed research, but I don't. I mean, I do when I write grant applications and I read it because I have to, but you don't need all the details of what the boots on the ground need. What is that take-home message from it? So I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I thought that before you invited me on your podcast. So
I am so honored that you're attending. And I'm just, again, cross fingers because tech is not my thing. It's Texas A&M's account on the Zoom. So it's a whole thing.
It's going to be amazing. So once you get this one done, we should start doing these more regularly. No, I'm serious.
I know.
This is a regular thing. Well, and that's okay. So I said the conference, but can I explain the whole background of Science of the Station?
Please do. Please.
Okay. So, and I've got to make sure that you're signed up for it, that the folks on the podcast are signed up for it. We have done a horrible job of translating science to practice. We've also done a horrible job, right? We've also done a horrible job of who are your trusted resources? How do you read science? All those types of things. We found it. We've known it for a long time. Like, honestly, when I first got my first FEMA funded project was probably about 15 years ago. And one of the things that they were really pushing on is like, what is the output of this study? Well, to me, I'm like, well, we wrote like 12 publications, which in the grant world is like, you're a rock star. Like NIH, the big NIH grants often don't get any publications. The most frequent number is 1 publication. So I thought I'd like performed beautifully. FEMA's like, yeah, those are great, but what are you doing to change the fire service? Like, well, but that's why all this other stuff is so important. And so we tried to create an organization years back of the scientists, and we took 3 meetings trying to pick a name for it. And I'm like,
Oh,
this is
hell.
so much. It was so fucking much. So we're like, this is not the moment. Like, this is not our we're going to keep pushing forward. But then I had a COVID project, and it was to look at kind of how the fire service responded to COVID and what did it need. What do we need for something like this happens again? And let me tell you, IFC and IFF early on created a task group, and they had Jim Augustine, Dr. Augustine would do a 5-minute update. Guy's brilliant. He's EMS director of, several departments around the country. He's worked with DC, he's worked in Florida, he's worked in Ohio, and he would give an update about here's what you need to know. And I'm like, man, if the whole fire service had, because everyone kept touting Jim Augustine. I'm like, if the whole fire service had access to him, it would have really changed the way the fire service responded to COVID. And then we had this moment in this meeting that we were like, everyone could. Like, he'll do a doc talk on it. So we started recording, kind of late in the game. And there's a lot of work. Patricia Watson, who works with NFFF and developed a stress first aid intervention, does a lot of talking about kind of creating the framework, especially around mental health, like having the framework for what you need before disaster strikes. And I'm like, that's what we need. We need to know who are the scientists. You should know the name and face of the scientists you need on human performance, on nutrition. Like, people should know that Megan exists, right? And there's not a network there's like ACOM for MDs that work in occupational medicine. There's, the fire service psychology group does specific to psychologists, so PhDs. But like, what about all the other people working in OC health? What about all the other people working in mental health? Let's get them talking to each other. So our goal with the Science to the Station, it's a health and wellness alliance, but it's really focused on creating a home for all of us that are interested in these topics. We should be pushing people to your 7-minute presentations. We should be pushing people to here's some evidence-informed broadcast. Here's the scientists. So I want all your scientists that are on there to join our merry band of nerds. Like, it's...
I love merry bands of nerds. They're the best.
And I tell you, the conference that's what I thought was so beautiful about the conference, was that it was not any specific, it was all of us together. And it was like conversations about who's doing it right. One of my colleagues here, we were meeting this morning, and she said that her favorite part was nobody was in their class A's. Like, yes. you had a fire chief. Let's see, our South Metro fire chief was there.
He's amazing.
Oh my gosh. But he's just hanging out, talking to people. Like, no one was like, oh, that's the chief. He was just a guy sitting at the table, drinking a glass of whiskey, So it was really, and I think we need more of that. I think we all need to like take off our badges and sit around and have meaningful conversation. So that's what it is. That's what our goal is. We're at 2,100 members so far. And we're like, the original meeting for this was 2 years ago yesterday, going like, let's build this. So you, I mean, and then it's kind of like the mafia. Like, once you're in, right? And you can't get out.
Well, I mean, I did join the merry band of nerds, so yes. I'm excited. And, it's interesting. After we sort of put together, praying, please, can you do a 7-minute presentation? I'm sorry, we're not charging anything, so I can't pay you as much as I'd love to pay you. After, we got all of our speakers and it was all set and we started advertising it, people were just popping out of the woodwork like, oh, yes. I want to do next time. I want to do next time. So I think there has to be a next time. And then we have to get you on there.
You got to do next time. You got to keep going. Because I think so here's what I think. And I don't, sometimes I'm like, am I a hammer so everything's a nail?
But yes, but...
Right. Yes. And people are hungry for this stuff. I mean, people are interested. They want to know not just what the problems are, but what are we doing about it? And that some of our best sessions have been who's doing it right. Denver Fire came on with their health and wellness crew and did here's what we're doing. They were like, we had so many people sign up for that, and people emailing me, hey, Sarah, is this going to be posted somewhere? Like, people are hungry for this information. Chiefs are hungry for, I need Donna Black who was just past president of IOC was like, we need a science 360. What do I need to know when I have to make a decision? What evidence do you have that can help me back it up or decide to go a different direction? And I'm like, yes. What can we put in an infographic? Like, those are one of the best hiring decisions. I love all the people that I work with, but one of the best decisions we made, and this is one I typically share credit for these things for anything and everything, because it's always a group process. But we brought a graphic designer on that we worked with, that we were contracting with her to work on several different things. So we brought her on full time because I noticed, at one point, we're paying her more in contracts. Let's bring her on. Let's just write her into projects. It is one of the best investments that we've had.
Yes. And you know what? There's this gap. There's such a big gap. The science is finally there, but it's very much like sport performance. 25 years ago, the researchers were doing the research and the coaches weren't listening. There was the gap. And it's the same thing with fire now. So we need as many people as possible bridging that gap and speaking that language and kind of giving them the so what, now what?
Yeah.
Oh, so excited.
And our long-term vision, though, science informing practice, but even more important, practice informing science. Like we have to, I've heard some really cool research ideas and I've heard some kind of shitty research ideas. These are just, you know what I mean? Like just things that aren't going to fly in the fire service. It is different than other occupational groups. And so some of the stuff is just not going to work if we don't do it right. And there's limited funding for research, right? I mean, it's not an endless spigot of money. In fact, if you compare fire service research to any law enforcement research, military research, like our pot of money per firefighter is tiny. So let's make sure that we're all working together and doing high impact stuff. And that if someone comes in with a new project, don't do what Denise Smith did 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Do the next step of what Denise Smith came up with. And she is one of the most giving, generous people, and professionally and personally, like she would absolutely give you like, here's your next step. So, and that's another thing that's really unique to fire service researchers. And I think that more so than, and within my not-for-profit firm that I'm with, we have law enforcement, corrections. We do some work in dispatch. One of our folks just got an RO1 for EMS. We do a lot of military and veterans. Other research groups do cool stuff. I mean, they do, and there are some, Strong Star out of Texas does amazing stuff. We're working with the Palo Alto VA. So some cool military, cool veteran stuff. But other groups that are coalescing around a topic tend to often like see each other as competition, or they keep ideas super tight to the chest. I just don't see that. And at least it hasn't been so far. And I hope it never gets that way. And that's part of what we want to do with the Alliance is like, let's all work together, and if I know someone who's doing some of the stuff you're doing, talk to them. And then you guys get it, like you do it together instead of each doing it separately. And, because results take 3 to 5 years to get out. So like we need to be talking today about what we're going to be publishing 3 to 5 years from now. Not fun.
You're just preaching to the choir. This is such a good conversation. This is such a good conversation. And, you're absolutely right. I sort of incited a riot with Dr. Dawes at Oklahoma State. I just said, Jay, the firefighters are still working out, doing physical fitness training, burpees, rowing, riding a bike, push-ups in their gear. We know that that's an unnecessary exposure. Also, physiologically, it isn't as good of a training impact, but no one's actually proven it. Yep. No one's actually done the research to say biomechanically it's less effective or whatever. And so I got him hyped up enough that now he's putting together a study. So
I'm very excited.
That's how things get done.
Like, if we don't ask the questions, We don't know, like, let's do the best we can. Let's do whatever
Yes.
is the very best that we can. And I think we owe it to folks that work in the space. Well, there's a lot that's just risky. Like shift work is someone's going to have to get in the middle of the night for grandma.
Mm-hmm.
Shift work's always going to be bad. So you're always going to be behind the 8 ball anyway. Like, let's figure out how. I think we owe it to these folks I think we owe it to the people who are on the front lines to give them the best, That's what
I
I think.
start most of my talks with, the fire service is just the general population, and then they're sleep deprived and traumatized and
Right.
subjected to unbelievably, insanely bad physiological working conditions.
Yeah.
And so, and we, for the most part, a lot of departments aren't able to give them or aren't giving them many resources to know what to do. Yeah. And so that's just that's my soapbox that I've been on for years. We have to do better. We have to do better taking care of our people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think it's taken, I've also learned this is my favorite term of late. I've learned I'm an apocalyptimist.
Oh, what is that?
So Responder Strong, Rhonda Kelly has a training, and that's one of the things the term she uses. And it's like, no matter how bad things are, being optimistic, like that we're going to get through this, that it's going to, yeah. And I love that term. I bring it up. I find a way to bring it up in every conversation because I think it's conceptually like such a beautiful idea. And I do think there's so much bad, but we've come so far.
Yes.
We've come so far. And I see like this absolute hunger for, you put it on LinkedIn, and I don't know where else you advertised it, but that you were going to do 7-minute talks by scientists on a Monday night, and you had 225 people 224 plus me sign up. Because people want to know. Like, that's freaking awesome.
That is pretty awesome.
There's so many people that are departments that are doing good things, that are doing it right. And I think sometimes there's like that whole analysis paralysis, like, what do we need to do? What do we need to do? And I think people are starting to go, whatever the next right thing is, that's what we need to do.
Yes. That's a Glennon Doyle thing, right? The next right decision. I think.
Maybe it is. I don't know. I also can't ever remember who said what. So pretty much it just stuck around me.
So, Sarah, is there an opposite of apocalyptimist? So the person that's the sky is falling no matter what. Is there a term for that?
I'm going to call him apoca-pessimist.
Apoca-pessimist.
Everyone in my office is like, we're apoca-realists, Sarah. And I'm like, no, that doesn't even like sound as cool as an apocalyptimist.
Apocalyptimist. Oh my gosh.
There are. I just don't like to be friends with them. But
that's true.
Yeah. But I think there are. Because I think, and that's when people start going like, there's all this stuff and it's so bad. And I'm like, but we can't get tied to that. There are a lot of bad things. There are a lot of health risks. And this is the thing, I've done research on women in the fire service and heard horrible stories about how they were treated. I've talked to people who have just seen the most tragic. Frank Lito he was ran FDNY's counseling services unit 9/11 till he retired, and he's just seen every form of human suffering that you could see. And at the end of the day, across the board, when you talk about all this stuff, they all go, it's the best job in the world. I'm like, you need to redefine best job. But at the end of the day, there's something about being in this role that just feeds your soul. That so it's like, yeah, it's dangerous. Yeah, we see increased risk of injury. We see increased, with the exposure to everyone's worst day is a challenge. But at the end of the day, like, there's so much going right. There's so much we can do.
let's keep on that thread because you mentioned analysis paralysis. You
Mhm.
know, departments think we don't have anything going on, therefore we don't know where to start. Let's just talk about that. If
Yeah.
you don't have a health and wellness program in place, give the listeners some good ideas of where they can just get started.
Oh man. Well, I think it depends on, do you want to kind of, so I think that's such a huge question. I think
Right.
first you step back and say, what do we have and what do we need?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Needs analysis always.
yes. And there is so many ways to do that. At the department level, Jen Taylor from Drexel has this focus project where you go and do surveys. But there's also, for folks that don't have access to that or a consultant or whatever, the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. Have you seen their vulnerability assessment program, the VAP?
I have not.
Oh my gosh, they did a fantastic job, and you can pick, your topic that you want to focus on, and it's a free program, and you can do assessments on, kind of where are the gaps. Um, and I always believe that, we is greater than me. So I think, getting the folks together that are interested in eating up these champions on the topic, even if it's a small group at first, and going, all right, what do we have? Do we have programs in place? And then what do we want to have? And on the mental health side, I think the low hanging fruit are, the awareness trainings, make sure everyone in the fire department is trained and aware of the mental health issues. Awesome programs out there. IAFF has some. First Responder Center of Excellence has the Stress First Aid Intervention. Responder Strong has some fantastic programs. And we actually, SFAI, the Stress First Aid Intervention, they have an online version now that you can do an abbreviated, and it's kind of like an intro to stress first aid. So I think some general awareness. I think then next, the evidence I really do believe supports the peer approach as the first line of defense. There's, when I talk about mental health, people are like, man, so does everyone need to be have a full-time psychologist? And I don't think they need to. I mean, I think that some people need that. And I think we need to train people to be aware of, and that's where I think peers come in, to be able to say, let's get you to, a next level. Let's warm hand off to someone who can help you with that if it's beyond what can be handled at the kitchen table, but so much can be handled at the kitchen table. So I think that's important too, to keep in mind, basically. And speaking of First Responder Center of Excellence, they have a fantastic roadmap to building a behavioral health program or a mental health and resilience program. So I think that's a great resource. On the other side of things, the health and wellness, I think, anything fitness, nutrition, sleep. And I used to just say fitness and nutrition, but I think we got to start adding in sleep for any of that stuff.
Amen.
Oh my gosh. I underestimate it. Have you read Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep?
I have. And one of my great friends is Dr. Allison Brager. She's a sleep neuroscientist. And we talk sleep all the time because it's so important.
I think it really is at the root of a lot of the things we're seeing. I mean, because it's everything, right? It's cardiovascular disease, it's cancer, it's reproductive health. We've been publishing a lot on reproductive health. Increased rates of miscarriage among career firefighters compared to general population, even higher among volunteers. So some of it's probably some exposures and those types of things, but like, what is the thing that 24/7 being on call, always having the pager next to you? I mean, not ever getting a good night's sleep. I don't know. And when we look at career firefighters, they're coming to work on average about 5.6 hours of sleep and leaving work at 5.8 hours of sleep. Like, you look at even short and all the stuff on hormones. Oh my God. You short sleep men, otherwise healthy men, for like 2 weeks. And I can't remember, I want to say 25% drop in testosterone. I may have just made that number up in my head, but a significant drop in testosterone. Like, interesting. Very interesting.
I love that you said sleep and nutrition and fitness and mental health because those are kind of the 4 pillars that I preach to everyone about. And I call them upstream interventions because they're happening before the problem, hopefully. But I always like to say sleep is the most upstream, A, because everything gets better when you sleep, and B, you make better nutritional choices when you sleep. You have more energy to exercise. Your mental health is improved. Everything gets better when you sleep.
100%.
Well, I know that you've done some significant work in the cardiovascular health realm. And I also know that a lot of my fellow firefighters very much underestimate the importance of cardiovascular health. They kind of just have it in their head, I'll get the job done. Whatever it takes, I'll get the job done. So if you were able to speak directly to those firefighters who are sort of disregarding their cardiovascular health right now, what would you say to them?
I would say that heart attacks suck.
Yes. Yes.
And I get it. Like sometimes you can get the job done, and I get it. Like with the right amount of stress and strain in that environment, you can. But why settle for can? Like why settle for just get the job done when you could get the job done really well with less wear and tear on your body? I mean, I think if you look at a lot of the cardiovascular risk factors, like it seems like, and even blood pressure, like the work that Denise Smith has done. She's from Skidmore and then Illinois Fire Service Institute. We need to be really aggressive at managing even borderline and subclinical, but concerning blood pressures with firefighters, because the fire ground for someone with any underlying cardiovascular disease is the perfect storm for a cardiovascular event, which is why you see that being the leading cause of on-duty deaths, is because everything that happens to your body and when you're fighting a fire is, it is like the most extreme cardiovascular stress test but here's the other thing that I think is important. And I don't know why I said important so weirdly, but the other thing I think that needs to be kept in mind is it's not just about you, right? So people are always like, well, if I go down, I'd rather go down in a fire because that's, then my family will be covered and all that stuff. But what about everyone else? Like when you hit the fire ground, your risk factors become everyone else's risk. Like, so if you don't want to do it for you, that's fine. Like, don't do it for you. But you really want to go down in a fire. And first of all, I know a lot of people over the years who have been with someone who went down in a fire, and it is traumatic for them to try and pull a coworker out of a fire. Any of those. I mean, it's tragic. It really is. And it's, you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be that weakest link. And the thing is typically when I talk to people who are struggling, they don't want to be the weakest link. They realize they are. Often they can't figure out how to get out of it, but they don't want to be the weakest link. They don't want to put everyone else at risk. And I do think, when I very first started this work, it was right around the time the MMWR report came out that did, reported on the historical data on firefighters and the leading cause of on-duty death being cardiac. And my dad had just had heart surgery. He'd had his first heart attack. It was not long after he had his first heart attack. And I tell you, sitting in the waiting room and like the moment of, and it's really kind of like what kicked off my passion for this field, because I realized like, people always tell me, oh, everyone's got to die of something, but you don't die like, I don't think when you die, you have that sense, you're not like, everyone's got to die of something. So I guess I'm not ever going to see my grandkids, or everyone's got to die. I mean, you don't get to just like take out those days you spent hungover in your 20s. Like you lose grandkid days, you lose, sitting on the porch watching sunsets, relaxing days, and you instead spend those, in a hospital. And so sitting in the waiting room, waiting for dad to come out of heart surgery. And we've done it a few times now. And he's now, followed by a congestive heart failure team, which I think they should call it heart optimization team, but nobody's listening to me.
I like it. I like it.
Don't you think? It's much more positive, but they're not apocalyptimists. Um, it's a shitty feeling. Like, it's a scary feeling. It's a scary feeling because I love my dad and I dread the day that he's not there. I have, he and I tell his story, and I'm going to try and do it without crying. Fortunately, since we're not in video, I will try and hide that if I do. But I mentioned my 7-year-old has Down syndrome. He and my dad have like a bond that it's awesome. Like, ever since he was born, my dad would call and he'd put him like on the, we just set the phone by the FaceTime by Crosby, like when I'd go take a shower or whatever. And he'd talk to Crosby for 20 minutes.
Oh,
And there's something about my dad and Crosby, and Crosby's still nonverbal. So, in terms of like memories of what he's going to form, a lot of times it's not until you really have that verbal that you can remember. Like, my greatest fear is that he won't remember my dad. It's not my greatest fear, but it's pretty high on the list in terms of like, and my dad talks now about like, and he's had a couple of heart surgeries. He's had some malignant melanoma they've had a hard time getting rid of. And I think, did he do things? I saw him do things. He always carried the gear in the back of his truck. I've seen him at fires over the years. I know there were times, in hindsight, he should have been wearing his SCBA and all that. Like, he can't change that now. But now that we know what we know, we got to change that for the people that are still out there doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. And one of the things that I tell my firefighters is, this is sort of the kindergarten explanation. I'm a biochemist, not an exercise physiologist. But my kindergarten explanation is firefighting is very physiologically expensive. And if you don't have a good credit score, or i.e. cardiovascular health, to bolster your performance, it's just too expensive. And that sort of gets through to them. But how can I make that even better? Because here you said it's the most extreme stress test. And so we're doing it in a hot and humid environment. We're doing it in what amounts to an oven pot holder.
Yep.
We're carrying the weight of the extra gear, the SCBA, the tools, the back pressure from the hose. It's very physiologically expensive. What else about it makes it the most extreme stress test? Are there other pieces that I'm not thinking of?
Well, I think it's everything from the, rush you get when the call comes in that smoke's showing. I mean, and that's what, we know that any time from the time you leave the station to the time you get back, like, you're at increased risk. Stefano Scales did a study on that where he looked at what the amount of increased risk was compared to being at the station during normal activities for having a cardiovascular event. And it was extremely, I'm trying to remember what the numbers were, but they got up to like over 100% more likely. It's the perfect storm. And it's not, there are other ones that have, like wildland or wildfire in particular, that's more of the marathon, right? So they're out for a long time and it's stressful. But like, this is the sprint of exhaustion. And you're doing it. And, we talk about the chemical exposures being, you're doing it in a toxic soup of an environment. And we talk about that being related to cancer, but it's also related to cardiovascular events. Like, you're absolutely right. Like, it's all the things. It is the perfect worst storm for that. So I love it. I love your analogy. So I'm going to steal that, but I'll credit you.
Steal away, my friend. And the other, go ahead, Sarah.
No, I love it.
Well, the other thing that, everything matters, but also it's very hard to manage, quote unquote, everything. But the other thing that I see happening quite a lot is firefighters coming into work already sleep deprived. You mentioned that, but dehydrated. Can you speak to, I know you probably can't give it a percentage increased risk, but can you speak to the magnitude of increased risk when we are going into an event like that already dehydrated?
I mean, it's almost like going in with without having changed your oil for, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor for it. And I don't know that I have a great one. I'm going to have to think about that. But that hydration is so important because it's so the foundation. And, we did a study where we looked at hydration and found that the majority of fire service folks come to work dehydrated, and you can't just start drinking, water that morning and think, oh, I'm going to be fine. Like it is what feeds all the cellular activity and supports your entire, like this hydration is just, yeah. So you're doing it dehydrated and you're going to be, sweating your ass off once you're out there. So you can't rehydrate fast enough in rehab. You can't do, I mean, there's just not it just really fuels all the parts of all the systems in your body. So, I think it's a significant issue and people just don't, it's like sleep where I think, we've underestimated the importance of it. And that one's even more simple than sleep. Like just drink water. Beer is not hydration. That doesn't count. Drink water.
Just drink the freaking water.
Right.
Yikes. Well, I think we could probably go down about 1.5 million rabbit holes, but I would like to take you down one more if you are good on time.
I'm good.
Okay. Because I'm somewhat selfish and because I am a female in the fire service, I have concerns. I'm concerned about everybody, but I have specific concerns for my female firefighters. Mm-hmm. And so the reproductive concern is a huge one. Postpartum, breastfeeding, another huge one. But can you speak to any other female specific concerns that you've come across either in your own research or in your lit reviews?
Yeah. So, I think 100% agree on reproductive. I think we have some good news on breastfeeding and that it might not look as dangerous as we thought. So that's, we did a study out with Jeff Burgess in Arizona. His initial study found elevations up to 72 hours, but it was a small sample. And so we were saying pump and dump for 72 hours, but it's a question, was there maybe one firefighter who had an environmental exposure, something like that. So we did a larger study, compared women across time and compared women in the fire service to their non-fire service breastfeeding friends. And we actually found no statistically significant elevation in the two classes of chemicals that we measured. Now, we didn't measure all chemicals. I personally would still pump and dump for a while, but I think, I don't think I think moms' bodies are amazing. So that's what I think on that. I did want to throw that in there.
Yeah, resilient.
100%. It is an actual miracle what they can, how they take care of baby. But the other thing that I think is key when I look at this space, based on the data we have, based on the data other people have, is mental health and women in the fire service and the significant toll of workplace instability. We did a study on looking at discrimination and harassment. So if you look overall, like across the board, rates of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, you see a higher rate for women compared to men who are in the fire service. So we did a lot of qualitative work leading up to this, and it didn't really women in the fire service tend to be a pretty badass group of individuals. Overall, they tend to be healthier, more fit than men in the fire service. They rates of obesity are lower, not only lower than men, but lower than the general population. And just a resilient, hardy group of women. Hardy psychologically, not like thick and hardy. Hardy psychologically.
Gotcha.
But so as we looked at the initial round of data, it's like that doesn't hang with what we see. And this is a study of about 2,000 women. So we divided it. We took the measures we had on discrimination and harassment. We divided it into tertiles, so low, medium, and high levels. And we found that women who were treated poorly at work, and I conceptualize that as robbed of the kitchen table, they're not supported in that way. 3 times the rate of depression, triple the risk of depression, similar pattern for post-traumatic stress, more likely to be injured, more likely to have missed work days, more likely to experience anxiety. Like it is, and I think, I think it seems like it's an innocuous thing to, oh, well, we were just joking, or, oh, we were just, and I've heard some horror stories about, showing up on scene to a fire and crews not getting out of the truck to see if the woman can manage as a captain. Like, who the hell would ever do that to like, no, nobody does that. Nobody does that. So I think that I it's so hard because people talk about, oh, DEI is an HR issue. DEI, and DEI is getting a bad rap, or getting a rap, whether you think it's positive or negative, about, oh, that's just a woke agenda item, or that's just a. But when you look at really when it comes down to it in the fire service, if you don't treat people well, and I think we'll see the same. We have some data on men, and and we're seeing the same pattern. If you rob people of the kitchen table, they do horribly. I think it's a lesson in what the fire service rates would be like if we didn't have the kitchen table. If we didn't have that identity, that camaraderie, that love and support and brotherhood and sisterhood. Like that is what, and so that's the other big thing that I keep pushing. And it, again, it's related to reproductive health. We're seeing, women age faster hormonally. So looking at anti-Müllerian hormone in particular, age faster than the general population. And the most predictive variable was a diagnosis of PTSD. And so I think it can't be overstated how important it is that we start to create inclusive environments, and not just for women. I mean, that's the thing, is that for men, I think we're seeing the same thing. For anyone that doesn't fit the archetype of a 6'3", white male firefighter, but there are some 6'3" white male firefighters who feel excluded from that environment too. And that's what I'm like, all these things, they're not HR issues. It's a health and safety issue. Not including people or excluding them is a health and safety issue. And I think if you look around and I think it was either 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 people basically feel like their workplace is not psychologically safe in the fire service. Now I think sometimes it's people that we don't realize feel that way, but what a shitty way to feel. And I think that, when you look at it, nobody wants to, I don't think most, so this is the other interesting thing, is we did a lot of qualitative work, talking to men and women in the fire service with that study. And I don't think most people want to exclude. I think sometimes they go, I've talked to folks who are like, well, we didn't know what to say. We got a woman on the crew. We didn't know what to say to her. So we just didn't say anything. And I'm like, oh yeah, but that was real comfortable.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome for her.
Yeah.
But it's, kind of that scare. And we've got a study from NIH looking at LGBTQ firefighters, and it's similar, like, oh, we just don't know what to say, so we don't say anything. Like, that's not the answer either. So I think we have to start having some real genuine conversations about inclusion and equity for everyone, really. But that's another one that I think, we've got other data on things like injury and gear fit and those types of things. But I think, like, at the beginning, that when I think of like the big issue that we've got to start shining a light on, and I think it's that.
I'm just thinking, as you were speaking, I was thinking about this. Every year we have these 10 or 12 mandatory target solutions trainings that get put on our calendar. And it's every January, it resets. You have to do the ethics training and the sexual harassment training and the hazmat. And there's, 10 or 12 of them. Yeah. But those trainings never change. And you really don't even have to pay attention to them to pass. I mean, I'm telling you, I have the tests memorized now. I can just click through. But it seems like it would be so much more useful to just have more timely timely training, the diversity and inclusion and things like that. We're not doing a great job, are we?
Well, so this was interesting. We had the women's study that ended up being a lot about DEI. It's not what we expected it to be about, but it ended up being a lot about that and psychological safety. And then we had a bullying grant, which is the same way. And we heard that, like, we need a different training for the fire service because we're not the standard bank. It's different than working at a bank. It's different than, this is our family. This is a 10 days a month a home for the career firefighters. And you have to build the central construct of trust in the fire service is so much more important than, like, if you don't trust the bank teller next to you, like, who gives a shit, right?
Right.
But if you don't trust the person that you're going into a burning fire with, that's a big issue. That has significant safety issues around it. And so I think the trainings have to reflect that. We actually started developing some, we call it the United in Service series, with women in fire, with some grants from FCSN. And we have some kind of more advanced in terms of, like, equity, inclusion, and specific issues, bystander intervention. Like, when you see someone being treated shitty, you got to understand why it's important to intervene and how to intervene and have difficult conversations. So we have some like that. But we also have kind of a basic course that we're stepping back and developing. And there's we're branding it under two different titles. One is, which I think a lot of departments, it's what they need, is a don't be an asshole training. And
thank you.
Right. So now I have had some people that are like, well, we try to not use language like that. And I'm like, okay, we will create a Brunacini version of be kind, like that, and good. Like, I think we should be kind, but sometimes even more basic than that, when you really get down to it and you talk to people, like, and someone said, well, sometimes you have to be an asshole. I'm like, well, there's a difference between having to be forceful about or writing an injustice but being an asshole is different, right? Being an asshole is being unkind, being, saying and doing things in a way that is excluding. I mean, it's different than having to have difficult conversations. Like, we can have difficult conversations all day, but we can do it respectfully. So it's we're working on the online version of it. But, like, let's quit dancing around it. Like, let's, I get it's funny. And, you watch, like, I think it was Rescue Me had, like, some whole bit about, don't use derogatory terms. And then, everyone's joking about all the different derogatory terms you could use around this fire training. And, like, let's quit pretending like that's not what's going to happen, right? That's going to be the conversation. But most people want to do the right thing. Not everyone, but most people do. And then, like, once you know better, do better. And I use the example with Crosby. I used to say retard all the time. Oh, that's so retarded. Didn't cross my mind. Like, and I was always like, well, there is an actual definition for retarded. And then I gave birth to a son who's retarded, like, actually by definition retarded. And I realized, wait a minute, me insulting someone. I used to make short bus jokes all the time. My son rides a short bus. Let me tell you, it is a really cool fucking bus full of really amazing kids. But we've always written it off, right? And same with the term retarded. Like, oh, that's, that's so retarded. You're so retarded. Well, it's not an insult to be like Crosby.
Listeners, we're back. Small technical difficulties, but we're back. Sarah, you were talking about how important words are.
Oh, yeah. Oh, was I talking Rescue One or the Rescue Me?
Yes.
So there's the episode where they're having the like the HR training, and they're like, it's important not to use racial slurs, and they start, like, throwing out oh, you mean like this, you mean like that, and I think it's time we quit pretending like that doesn't happen. Like, that does happen, and people are going to make those jokes, but I think we have to start looking at and, like, understanding why those things matter. Why. And I use the example of the term retard, retarded, which I used all the time before I had a son who actually was. So I think it's, I think it does matter. I think words matter. I think even calling firemen, and people are like, oh, it doesn't matter. We can call them. I don't mind being called a fireman. And, people say, well, why use firefighter? And it's like, well, then if it doesn't matter, then let's call everyone fire chicks.
Let's do it.
It doesn't matter. Usually that's when people are like, no, I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Well, and it's interesting, Sarah. I flipped back in my notes, and you were talking about women and the prevalence of mental health issues and et cetera, et cetera. And I was a real asshole yesterday. I was a raging, words I'm not going to say on my own podcast. I got home after 48, and all I wanted to do was just veg. I was not fit for human consumption.
Yeah.
And then my doorbell started ringing, and I just ignored it, and then they weren't going away. And so I went and got dressed, opened my door, and it's this nice lady. She's like, "Hi, I'm so-and-so's mother-in-law from next door." And I'm like, "Can I help you?" She's like, "Yeah, we are afraid you have a gas leak." And I was like, okay, why do you think that? And she's like, "Well, I'm smelling gas." She's just trying to help.
Right.
And I'm immediately just from zero to pissed off, because I know a gas leak is going to be not a whiff or a puff. It's going to be a strong odor of gas. I'm going to smell it inside. So I was like, yeah, this isn't a problem. I'm not concerned. And it just devolved from there. And so I finally just said, if you're concerned, you can call the gas company. I'm not going to bother them on Sunday. And I went back in my house, and I should have stayed there. But then the gas company showed up. So then I had to go out and be an asshole to them too. I was a fucking degenerate piece of shit asshole to my neighbors who were sincerely just trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
Because I was tired, and I have no empathy, no compassion, and no kindness left after 48 hours.
Yep.
And so today I wrote a very sincere and heartfelt letter to them. And I went and got a plant, and I put it on their front porch because I really, really hope they forgive me. But I was such a jerk.
Yeah. But that's it's part of it, right? It's part of all as much as a fire is the perfect storm for a heart attack, all the shit you are exposed to on the job is the perfect storm for being an asshole. And that's part, but it's why it's so important to be talking about it. It's why it's so important to go, all right, listen, it does matter. It does. Kane Nixon out of Arizona talks about the gas meter, the give a shit meter. And that's one of the things that I think we have to pay attention to is sometimes the job just drains your gas meter and you have no shits left to give. Right. And you have to be aware of it. And today you're like, God, that was a total bitch move. I need to apologize. And that's going to happen sometimes. And it's really going okay, wait a minute. I need to know. And I need to let my family know, there was, and I can't remember. I try to always credit the people with the good idea, although I've also shared that I have a horrible memory. There was someone that was telling me that they had a paddle, like a ping pong paddle, like a green, red ping pong paddle. And when they came in and they were just completely out of emotional energy, they'd put it to red. And so their family knew they were going to need a minute. You also, in your instance, could have used that to hit your neighbor.
Well, so and
a paddle.
Part of what I did was first I just sincerely apologized. I said I was neither nice nor kind, and please, I apologize, and please pass on the apologies to your mother. That said, I want to explain, not excuse my behavior, but just explain.
Yeah.
And so, it was a one-page single-spaced, it was a manifesto. I hope they read it, but yeah.
It's okay. Everyone makes mistakes though. But that's the thing though. You owned it and you said, all right, I see what happened. I see why it happened. And part of it is just, you just have to have your blinders off and realize we all make mistakes. I am sometimes a total asshole. Ask my husband, I'm a total asshole a lot. But sometimes you just don't have anything left. Sometimes there's just no shits left to give.
0 shits were given yesterday. Today's a better day.
See?
All right. I want to start wrapping up, Sarah, and be respectful of your time. I always finish the podcast with, was there something that you were hoping to talk about that I didn't ask you, or do you have some sage words of wisdom to leave the listeners with?
Sage words of wisdom. I don't know that that's anything that anyone's ever claimed I had. I would say, no, I do. I think that just don't give up. Like sometimes it's so hard. Sometimes it's easy to think like this is all going to shit. We're never going to get to be where we need to be. We're never going to make the progress. The work is never going to be done. And just don't give up. Like things are getting better. I think we're at a point, like you're doing a podcast on firefighter health and people care, right? You are going to have listeners on this.
Right.
You had 224 plus me people sign up for your 7-minute sessions with scientists. Like, know that you're not alone. If you're interested in this space and you listened to the entire time of me babbling on about random stuff, it means that you care. And I think this is our moment. This is like, we always talk about culture change and, the culture, this, the culture, that. This is the moment. This is the moment to change, and we are going to do it, and we're all going to do it together.
I think that's an amazing place to end, and I think that we can both drop the proverbial mic and just say that AZ and Sara are officially out. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.